Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I'm glad that you guys can join me on this early Monday morning. I guess it depends on where you are, but early on the East Coast. This show is based on the East Coast time zone. And so early, goddammit, we're going to go with that. I hope you guys are doing okay this morning. Mondays are always tough. Mondays are always difficult, even for me, even when the show is in the evening. Mondays are always tough. But nevertheless, we're here. We're here together. We're going to do the news and what news we have. I want to give a shout out to the chat. If you guys dig this content, as the show progresses and you find yourself really digging the content, give it a like, share the video. You can also support this content: PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, memberships, buy me a coffee, etc. All of those things help the content. It is the objective of this show to try to get a producer. I really want one, especially at the beginning of the year. I also want to do things, the thumbnails, all of those things require funds and resources to do. So the show needs to grow in order to do those things. That is my objective. That is what I want to accomplish. So you all have my thanks for joining me. You all have my thanks for liking the video. You all have my thanks for being here. I guess some of the big interesting news, at least on the domestic front, is Donald Trump attacks on MAGA. This has been fascinating to me. For all intents and purposes, you are effectively attacking the people that got you to where you are. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, Thomas Massie, Rand Paul, all of these people are widely considered to be true blue MAGA, meaning America first, in the most America first sense of the term, and principled. Marjorie Taylor Greene has surprised me recently, but nevertheless, they're considered to be principled as Republicans. Trump has gone ballistic, attacking them for being America first. Now, this has been on two fronts. On the Israel front, with people like Tucker Carlson asking questions like, hey, why are we giving all this money to Israel and they're murdering all of these people? There's that. Marjorie Taylor Greene, hey, why are you fighting so hard against releasing the Epstein list? The guy was an apex predator. He was a pedophile. And you seem to be throwing your body to do any and everything in your power to effectively protect that guy. Now, seeing the recent emails gives us a hint as to why Donald Trump has been doing that. Overnight, realizing how bad this looks, Trump has done a 180 and it says, okay, release everything, release the information, release the documents. Now, mind you, he wants to release the stuff going after Democrats, missing the fact that the emails that have come out have been damaging, extraordinarily damaging. And when it makes it look as if, well, not makes it look as if, Trump obviously had a relationship to Epstein going up into his first term as president. Trump obviously had a financial relationship with Epstein, getting a lot of money from Epstein in regards to his house. He obviously hung out with the victims of Epstein, meaning the people that Epstein was effectively abusing. Donald Trump knew those victims and hung out with those victims. This looks horrendous, especially with the amount of energy that you've put into fighting having this information released. Being Johnny come lately and making 180 at the last minute, I don't think it matters. The other issue is the corruption that is hitting Ukraine. And there are different points of view on this. NABU was an organization that was widely understood to be controlled by the United States. It was a corruption agency that Ukraine didn't necessarily control. If you remember, I think it was several months ago, Zelensky tried to take control of the organization when the organization started looking around people who were close to Zelensky. Now, what you've ended up with is, what is his name? Minrich. He's fled the country and fled to Israel. Israel doesn't have an extradition treaty, so there's that. I think it's one or two other ministers have effectively stepped down because, again, Nebu is getting closer and closer. Telezhenko, when he was on the show, he pointed out that Zelensky is in those files. He just hasn't been outed yet. Now, Kolomoisky, the one who used to effectively billionaire pay for Zelensky, has made the point of saying, your time is up. Basically, you're on your way out. that Mendrich is a fall guy. Mendrich is not the person who's the leader of all of this, and has pointed the finger at Zelensky, saying, and I want to get the quote right. Right. Effectively points out Zelensky's, where Zelensky is done. Well, that was one of the things that he pointed out in saying. So this looks bad, but there have been other people who've made the argument of like, look, the amount of money that Ukraine has been, what's the word I'm looking for? Embezzling, stealing, taking, the fraud that has been roiling Ukraine, that has been going on for years, that the amount that they're talking about here, $100 million, is little to nothing in the context of the amount of money that they've been stealing over the course of the 3 years, which amounts to billions. And pointing out that if that didn't take Zelensky out, then this is not going to take Zelensky out. Yeah, call him a fall guy, call Mendrich fall guy, and pointed out that Zelensky will, quote, soon be gone, unquote. We'll see. There's some Russian experts that don't quite believe that. There's the belief that either the Trump administration, the United States, or the Europeans are sick of Zelensky, and that this is their way of trying to get rid of him and replace him with somebody like Poroshenko. I don't know. I mean, the reality of it is that would be a massively destabilizing, let's say, switcheroo, if that indeed happened, because that's not necessarily going to take place in a vacuum. Also, it doesn't necessarily seem like people have abandoned Zelensky in this case. I don't see massive protests that are out there in the way for another color revolution. So we'll see. Mark is going to be here at 7:15. We can discuss it with Mark to get more details on it. There's also what I found to be super interesting, a phone call between Putin and Netanyahu on the issue of the Gaza peacekeepers. Now, this is going to go through the UN Security Council. And obviously, Russia has a veto vote in the UN Security Council and can put the kibosh on this deal. Professor Morandi, if you remember, I think it was at Valdai, asked Putin about this quote-unquote ceasefire that is not a ceasefire. And I think Morandi was a bit shocked by Putin's answer when Putin kind of gave this affirmative of agreeing with the ceasefire. Because people like me, I would imagine people like Morandi, and other people who follow this stuff know that the ceasefire was a ceasefire in name only. So it is a question about whether or not the Russians would agree on this front. I got to be honest with you, the whole Russia-Israel thing confuses me in general. But again, Mark is going to be here. Maybe Mark can give a little bit more context on this. It's just very strange. That's all. The other story, what time is it? Okay, we have 5 minutes. The other story that has been bubbling up beyond the probe has to do with the areas that Russia is advancing. Russia seems to be advancing on all fronts. One of the analysts went to Ukraine, came back, and effectively said that there are nearly as many desertions as there are casualties at this point, which is mind-blowing when you think about it. Pointed out that drones are the predominant, let's say, fighting force, or let's say the predominant killers in the region, especially from the standpoint of hitting Ukraine in the rear, and that Ukraine doesn't have the capacity to replicate. Russia has been destroying the energy infrastructure in regards to Ukraine. And what's wild about that is Zelensky apparently makes a deal with Greece to get energy, oil, gas, etc. Greece gets more than 50% of his energy in 2025 from Russia. It would be a sick joke if all of these people weren't effectively dying. Beyond the energy thing, on the front lines in Zaporozhye, it seems that the front for Ukraine is collapsing. There's been multiple areas that are liberated. One of these, Malaya Machaka. There's another one, Rovinopolye. Nail that. I was practicing that before I got on the show because some of these names are kind of difficult to pronounce. The other one is Yablokovo. All of these are areas in Zaporozhye that are effectively falling apart. In Minograd, many of the Ukrainian troops, those that could get out, have been trying to get out. Obviously, the noose has been tightened in Minograd, Pokrovsk, Kupiansk. Pokrovsk is about to fall. When Pokrovsk falls, Minograd is effectively going to be blocked off. Kupiansk is also encircled. That is in another cauldron. This is not a recipe for success. Russia seems to be advancing on all fronts. Ukraine doesn't seem to have the manpower in order to compensate for the Russian advance. And this advance seems to be picking up speed and picking up steam. Now, in the very beginning, there was a lot of attacks, or let's say criticisms, of Putin on this idea of speeding up the progress of the war and speeding up the progress of the conflict. And I think what we're looking at is effectively the speed of this progressing. We're going to see, most likely, multiple locations fall back to back to back. It's not just going to be Pokrovsk. It's not just going to be Kupiansk. It's not just going to be Siversk. It's not just going to be Minograd. I hope you get my point. Those are 4 by itself. But you're going to see what seems to be these multiple cauldrons that are effectively taking place all at once. Will this create political chaos? Again, it's hard to know. The other issue that is hitting Ukraine, in addition to failing militarily, has to do with what is taking place from the standpoint of bankruptcy. Ukraine is going to have over a $50 billion shortfall. And so the Europeans, like vultures, have become that much more animated in trying to get their hands on the Russian assets that are in Belgium. They are very aggressive in trying to get their hands on that money. But up to this point, the Belgians have said, no, we're not doing that. In fact, Euroclear, the bank that is holding that money, has went so far as to say we will sue the European Union if indeed they try to get their hands on the $200 billion that is in their possession. I think it's $300 billion total over the course of Europe, but $200 billion of that money is in Euroclear. So up the creek without a paddle, not just militarily, but also financially. Now, the Europeans have said we can't afford to keep this war going if we don't get hands on the Russian money, as if that is somehow going to make a difference in them getting their hands on the Russian money. I see my man in the background, the one, the only, Mark Sleboda. How you doing, Mark? You doing okay this evening?
I'm alive. How the hell are you, Jamaro? Thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
I am breathing. My heart is beating. So I'm going to go with the thing that I'm alive to, Mark. Mark Sleboda, he's an international relations security analyst. You can follow Mark on his Boosty, Boosty, Realpolitik with Mark Sleboda. Or you can just put in Mark Sleboda. He will appear. Mark puts all of his interviews and everything else up on his channel. It is a fantastic channel to get analysis on international relations, specifically around the area of Russia. Mark, always appreciate having you, man. Let's start, I guess, with corruption. There is, let's say, there is a budding point of view. I call it that. There's a budding point of view that Nabu belongs to the United States.
I've got your kickback. Don't worry.
Huh?
I've got your kickback. Don't worry. You said we were doing corruption. You said we were doing corruption, right?
Oh, we're doing fair enough. Well, I was talking about corruption in Kiev or in Ukraine in this case, but fair enough. This story has been getting right much news, actually, and it's even been getting right much news in the West. I think it was the Telegraph says Zelensky needs to step aside. and also part of the narrative that has come up is because Naboo is believed to be controlled by the United States or by the Europeans, that this is their way of pushing him out in order to try to get somebody else more favorable in the position. Menrich left the country, went to Israel. I think it was 2 other ministers stepped down. And one of my other guests who used to actually be part of, let's say, the Kiev government, he was a whistleblower. He pointed out that Zelensky's name is in these files. That name just hasn't necessarily been mentioned yet. What is the effect? Is this really having this significant effect in the way that they're talking about in the West, that this is the thing that may actually get rid of Zelensky? In fact, Kolomoisky went so far as to say Zelensky will be gone soon. He's, quote, soon to be gone, calling him Generalissimo Napoleon IV.
That's referencing the fact that in one of the movies,
right,
his comedy movies made under Kolomoisky's production TV company, that Zelensky played Napoleon in a comedy, and that is a kind of bitter reference to that.
Who controls
Naboo? Yeah, okay, that's a good question, and I mean that gets to the heart of it, because corruption, right? Everyone knows Ukraine is corrupt. Yes. The Western media has reported that Ukraine has corrupt for the last decade, and there was, despite all of this erection of these quote unquote anti-corruption watchdogs, Naboo, Sapo, they were constructed by the US and the EU, right? And they still do, as far as anyone knows, maintain the commanding heights of these organizations, and they were intended as leverage, right? As leverage against the Kiev regime when and if they needed it, because everyone in Ukraine in politics is corrupt. The last government in Ukraine, that of Yanukovych, was corrupt, and that was one of the biggest rationale of the Maidan, right? Was, the Yanukovych government is corrupt, we need to overthrow it, right? That was the narrative. And of course, the one that replaced it is even more corrupt than that one was. And you could go back. Ukraine has been mired in corruption since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and they never had a Putin. They never had someone whom I would never venture to say that there is no corruption in Russia, but I would venture to say that today there is less corruption than there ever has been, and that in many real ways there is probably less corruption today in Russia than there is in the United States or the EU, or many countries within the EU. And the conflict in Ukraine has been used by the Kremlin to purge a lot of the corruption, particularly out of the Ministry of Defense and the general. I mean, we've seen that. We've seen numerous generals, right, go to court, being brought down and going to court, one after another, and until they learn the lesson that, the existence of Russia is on the line. This is an existential conflict, and get your damn hands out of the cookie jar and do your job.
Right.
But Ukraine never had any of that. They never had this new political social contract that Russia had under Putin, where he told the oligarchs that, listen, I will not pursue you and the process by which you got your ill-gained, filthy lucre during the 1990s. I won't pursue that. But right. One, that process ends now. And two, you will stay the hell out of politics, or I will rain the FSB down on your heads, right? And that was the separation, right? The oligarchs were exiled to, I mean, nothing is 100%, but to a very large degree from politics, from buying politicians and the like. And in Ukraine, that has never happened. To a large extent, politics is patronage clans from oligarchs in Ukraine. And Zelensky is a case in point because, as you mentioned, Igor Kolomoisky it was the oligarch patron of Zelensky until in the last few years, Zelensky turned on him, bit the hand that fed him. And now I think Kolomoisky has long been plotting his revenge, and he's doing it from he's still under investigation and under arrest. He's in and out of court, and he feels that this is his revenge, and that Zelensky, the Generalissimo Napoleon IV, as you mentioned, is gone. So, but back to your question, who controls Nabu and Sapo, right? They haven't been unleashed till now. The regime is corrupt. That's been factored into the business model of fighting Russia through this proxy. It was understood that is just part of the model, right? That is the price of doing business with the Kiev regime, is that there is corruption, and everyone should just look the other way. I mean, in the Western mainstream media, until now, right? When top figures personally close to Zelensky and within his, the tight circle in his regime have been implicated. So, right. I mean, this is obviously a power play by someone, right? Nabu and Sapo have fulfilled their functions. They were intended as weapons, right? They're not real anti-corruption watchdogs. They were intended as weapons, as leverage. The question is who is using this leverage, right? I think we can write the Europeans out. There's no indication at all that the Europeans have. I mean, they hug Zelensky, they kiss him, they throw themselves down at his feet. He's their best buddy. Macron, Starmer, Merz. There's no any indication. In fact, they have rallied around him multiple times through this. And it has to be said. Let's before I forget to come back to it. It's quite obvious that Zelensky saw this coming a mile away. Yes, right? Because he attempted to gain control of Nabu and Sapo. We were talking about it months ago, right? He was attempting to seize control, and he was blocked from doing so, largely by the Europeans. Now, they didn't pursue it any further, right? But they wanted to maintain that leverage. These protests started to tepid protests, the first real protests since the Maidan Putsch in 2014, right? And that was when Zelensky opened the doors for the first time since 2022 for Ukrainian men between the ages of 18 and 22. And a lot of people have, I think, correctly read that as an attempt to bleed the steam or the oxygen off of protests, right? Because young men are, the primary vehicle of protests everywhere in the world, and if that reservoir is emptied with all of them fleeing into Europe, then there's less people. Now, of course, that's less people to conscript into his future army when they eventually lower that conscription age below 25, in line with the they haven't done it thus far due to the extreme social hot button issue of Ukraine's future demographics and how small that contingent of young men is in demographic terms anyway, because Ukrainians haven't had children for the last 20, close to 30 years now, because of the economic conditions and everything in Ukraine. Their birth rate has gone to nothing. So they need to maintain that age group that could still have children if there's any hope of a future Ukraine, right? Ukraine's population has dropped from 50 million at the dissolution of the Soviet Union to somewhat less than 30 million, probably around 25 million right now, between high death rate, immigration out of the country, both ways, to Russia and to Europe, refugees to Russia and Europe, and of course, deaths as a result of the
War.
conflict. So, I mean, we can't imagine that demographic crisis when within 30 years, the population of a major country in population terms has halved. It's, it's really inconceivable, right? So that's why they haven't touched that age group. But anyway, so back to who controls Nabu and Zapo. Are the Americans behind this? Okay. If they are being unusually and uncharacteristically quiet about this, which the Trump administration has never done that. They've never been good at that, right? There's always someone talking, if not Trump blabbing openly on his social media posts, talking about how bad Zelensky is or something like that. There's nothing. They're keeping almost eerily quiet over this whole affair, and that has led some people, I think, to believe that they are behind it, right, rather than the opposite, right? It's one or the other, right? Either they are behind it and they're keeping unusually quiet, or they're not behind it and they don't want to lend fuel to the fire, and they're trying to figure out what the hell is going on and how to react. Now, the former Ukrainian prime minister, under the end at Viktor Yanukovych, Azarov, in the former prime minister under Yanukovych.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's in political exile in Russia. He has come out and said that he believes that the U.S. is behind this. Okay, well, that's a serious individual, and he knows some things and so forth. So we can't completely discount that. Kirill Dmitriev, the Putin's shall we say, version of Witkoff, the head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, who has been back and forth to the United States on this, diplomatic game. He noted how unusually quiet the White House has been about all of this in a social media post. And it's quite obvious that he is implying that he thinks that the White House, that Trump
is behind it.
Yeah, the White House is behind it. I'm not so sure about that because I haven't seen any signs of that. And there has been no effort made to elevate anyone else. And you would think that would be a prerequisite, right? If you're moving to get rid of someone, obviously you want to promote someone to replace him, someone more amenable to what you want with Ukraine. And there has been no attempt to do that by the US, by the EU, by no one. And it's really hard to imagine who they would thus elevate, who would presumably do something different, because it's really hard to imagine anyone they could elevate out of the Maidan milieu, right? Out of the greater Maidan regime, Zelensky's and previous, who would sit down and make concessions largely on Russian terms, because that's what these people are arguing, that Trump is looking so that someone who can, agree at least in part to make concessions on a settlement of the conflict with Russia. That's what they're arguing, and I don't see that. Zaluzhny, right? The former head of the Kiev regime's military, whom is still in London, as far as anyone knows, in exile as a quote unquote ambassador, despite not speaking English. He's a Banderite.
Right.
Zelensky has come to Banderism as a result of finding out that is the pillars of the regime that he inherited, and I think has fully internalized it. But Zaluzhny, he is a Banderite. I mean, I remember the pictures of him posing for photos inside his military office when he was the king of the military. And he had the big red and black blood and soil banner of the OUN on the back wall and 2 busts of Stepan Bandera, because
right.
one bust isn't enough, and one of Roman Chukovich in that room, right? And he made multiple social media posts, with him smiling with the red and black banner and with statues of Bandera and everything, right? I mean, he's committed. So I don't see him as any kind of improvement if what you want is a diplomatic settlement. Quite the opposite. And we haven't, the other possible figures that are only mildly less toxic. Timoshenko, she's been out to pasture in political terms for a long time, and there's been no attempt to elevate her. Poroshenko, I mean, he was voted out, by the when they're presented with 2 Maidan choices, and that's it, right, in the quote unquote elections that the Kiev regime has held. But he was solidly voted out by the Ukrainian people. I mean, they were absolutely through with him. I mean, that hasn't stopped his ambitions, but I don't think anyone else really sees him as coming back to helm Ukraine, much less Ukrainians. So it's really hard to see. And there should be some groundwork laid, right, if they're planning to replace him. With who, and again, the U.S. is completely quiet on this. So there's some people that aren't quiet on this, right? And the first one we've already mentioned, Igor Kolomoisky, right? This spurned oligarch patron of Zelensky's, who is openly gloating that Zelensky is gone, and implying that he has a very heavy hand in all of this, even despite being under arrest and further investigation and in out of court and prison and everything else. But the money does that. But we've also heard a lot recently from Poroshenko, the former candy oligarch, quote unquote, president of the Kiev regime, who still dreams of regaining power, and Klitschko, Vitaly Klitschko, the former boxer and figurehead of the Maidan, whom is the mayor of Kiev, and has long been calling Zelensky a dictator and everything else, which is just ironic because Klitschko, as one of the Maidan leaders, had no problems when the dictatorship was erasing the voices of East Ukraine, right? All the people, the parties, the band in East Ukraine, the leftist parties, the media outlets, the Russian Orthodox, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, everything that was, he had no problem with that type of dictatorship. But when Zelensky started to gather power away from everyone else except for him in the Maidan regime, then of course, then it's dictatorship, right? But anyway, so they have been making a lot of noise recently. Not noise that I can see has in any way been amplified by the US or the EU, but on their own, right? And the Ukrainian Telegram channels are full of discussion, right? That this is them and Kolomoisky behind all of this.
Oh, an inside job.
Yes, that this is a dirty knives in the dark, the unsheathing of the knives within the Maidan regime itself. That this is the culmination of some acts of political revenge and political ambitions of some of them, and that this could not come at a worse time for the Kiev regime in general, with the crumbling of the defensive lines in the Donbass and Zaporozhye, with the problem with Russia's long-range strikes on the energy infrastructure leading to blackouts throughout the country, with the Kiev regime facing a financial apocalypse in the
Mhm.
early months of next year, unless Europe coughs up with the money and steals Russia's money, then the regime is going to go bankrupt. I mean, they're going to have to start printing money, devaluing the hryvnia, leading to a crazy economic crisis and political instability within the country that they have avoided because of the constant influx of Western money up until now. But now the spigots are empty. The U.S. has said, no, we're out of this. And the Europeans have to pay for it, and the Europeans can't pay for it.
Right.
So that is, these multiple crises. And then if you have this political instability thrown on top of it, I don't want to say, I mean, perfect storm is a cliche, but it's a damn sight of a storm anyway,
Yeah.
because it's further destabilizing all of this. Now, you can argue about that, but in either way, it's not in the U.S.'s interests or anyone's interests, other than Russia, to destabilize the Kiev regime. So this has nothing to do with that being done intentionally, but I'm perfectly willing to believe that Petro Poroshenko and Kolomoisky and Klitschko and other, top oligarchs that feel slighted and that they should be running the ship are perfectly willing to risk dashing that ship onto the rocks for themselves to gain power. So until I see some sign that the Trump administration is showing a degree of subtlety and conniving that they have never shown thus far, right? Some 5D chess. I know people love to believe that this Trump administration is capable of 5D chess. I've never seen any evidence of it so far, or even the last administration. But, hope for some people dies eternal.
Yeah.
So right now, all I see is this is a dirty domestic political knives out within the Maidan regime, mud fight. And, if I ate popcorn, I'd be tossing back some popcorn and seeing what's happening, because the political instability can only benefit Russia.
I don't get it though.
Yeah.
Oh no, please finish. I'm sorry. No, please continue.
I was just going to say that, I mean, that's one of the reasons that Russia has openly stated that they've never gotten rid of Zelensky, that they've never killed him and his top people or anything, because he's so incompetent at the job that anyone that they replaced him with might be an improvement. And they didn't want, I mean, they're quite serious about that. I believe it. They don't want someone who will think rationally, maybe actually let his generals run the war instead of micromanaging it with political, intent, things like that. Russia doesn't want that, right? So they've been, I mean, I all the time you hear, why doesn't Russia just take Zelensky and Syrskyi and these others out? Why don't they just send the Oreshniks or Kinjals or whatever and take them out? And I mean, the Kiev regime has been quite open that it's tried to kill Putin multiple times and it's just never succeeded. And the reason it's simple is that Russia they would just replace them, and those other people might be more competent, more rational, and so forth. And that's why Russia really has no interest in Zelensky being replaced again by someone potentially. Now, the instability along the way is another story, of course. That's very good for Russia. But I certainly don't think Russia is behind this either. This is some, I believe that for the US and the EU, this is unintended consequences. And the fact that these other political figures within the Maidan have gained control of the process on the ground, as it were, in Kiev, and they're pursuing their own personal agendas. That's what I see right now, right? I perfectly am willing to consider that. The Europeans know. I'm perfectly willing to consider that the Americans have a hand in this. I just haven't seen any evidence at all of it so far.
Yeah. It's weird though. I mean, because Netanyahu has been around since the beginning. They obviously are bad at their jobs because, as you point out, corruption is endemic in
They're as
Ukraine.
corrupt as everyone else. That's
Yeah.
why.
And so it's like now all of a sudden they pop in and be like,
It's
hey, there's
just a
corruption here. There's gambling in this establishment.
it's just a weapon. It's a weapon for leverage that the U.S. and the EU baked into Ukraine, right? And now I think it's been picked up. But as far as I can tell thus far, it's not the Europeans' hand at the end of the weapon, and it's not even the Americans. It's some dirty Ukrainian politics that are fumbling around with the weapon right now. That's again. I'm waiting to see evidence otherwise that the U.S. might be behind this. I just haven't seen any evidence of it thus far. As soon as I do, if I do, then I'll let you know. But I'm watching that, and there's talk, but the majority of the talk is about the domestic political implications on the Ukrainian, Telegram and political channels. That this is domestic. This is sordid. It's nasty. It's personal. It's not rational, considering the circumstances that the regime is in. But power, it doesn't really, always, act on rational interest terms. I think that the West has just too much invested in the person of Zelensky at this point. There was a point a few years ago, back in 2023, where there was a brief window that they possibly could have replaced him with Zelensky, but they didn't move on it back then. And I now any move to replace him risks bringing the whole thing down, the whole rotten house of cards. I would consider it too risky. Now, I believe that Trump doesn't give two figs about Zelensky. I believe that Trump has nothing but contempt for Zelensky, as he has nothing but contempt for Macron and Starmer and these others. But the U.S. government, right, the real U.S. government, the deep state, the blob, whatever you want to call it, I think as far as they're concerned, the preservation of Zelensky, at least, at the current time, is essential. That it's too late to jump horses midstream, at this point.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a question. Who is controlling this? Is the U.S. really behind this, which would make a degree of sense, or is this a lot more chaotic and simply domestically, personal and power based, and the U.S. has just lost control of the weapon? But ultimately, if it's not the U.S., then I think Zelensky is at the end of the day safe, right? No one is going to be able to remove him without a green light from the U.S. because ultimately, even if the U.S. is not directly supplying the money and the arms, it's coming through their vassals in Europe. Ultimately, the U.S. controls that process. And if the U.S. isn't happy about the overthrow of Zelensky, then they can just cut off that tap completely. Everyone knows that, right? The regime in Kiev survives because the U.S. demands that it be so until Russia removes it, physically from the board, which is still down the road. So if Zelensky does go, then that's a green light. That the U.S. is behind it, but I don't see that. Right, I see him weakened. I see him reeling. I see him becoming even more unhinged. I see people next to him falling left and right and having to be replaced. I see, his power base in Ukraine weakening, but I don't see him removed. Now there is a possible he could attempt to. Judas Goat this whole thing if Timur Mindich isn't enough. And Timur Mindich, right, he is referred to in the Ukrainian, the Kiev regime's press as Zelensky's wallet, right? He was the co-founder and co-owner of Zelensky's comedy company, Kvartal 95, with Zelensky. Right, they were in on it together from the beginning. And Mindich was never brought into the government per se, but according to multiple accounts, he's still, Zelensky's principal, confidant and backer, particularly since Kolomoisky, he turned on Kolomoisky on the scene. And this guy who had never had anything to do with defense in his life or anything, right? Comedy company. He started up from scratch drone companies, defense companies making drones in no bid contracts. And he got control of a big part of the energy center through Ukraine Energo, the nuclear portion of their power system and everything, which is part of this whole corruption scheme. It's all about contracts and even the idea that you have to pay to Mindich just to get access to contracts, right? That sort of thing going on. That's where all of this is. And as you said, Mindich has fled the country. The Justice Ministry and the Energy Minister who are implicated have resigned and will probably flee the country if they can. And the other one who has fled the country is the Kiev regime's former defense minister and still chair of their security council, Rustem Umarov, who hours, like with Mindich, hours before the Nabu people showed up at his house, he fled the country first to Turkey, where he has a lot of close contacts, and then supposedly on to the UAE and Qatar. But no one expects him to actually come back to Ukraine at this point. So there's there's definitely a crisis going on, but right now I don't. Kolomoisky seems Kolomoisky is actually reacting a bit. He's gloating, but he's also reacting angrily at the focus on Mindich, saying, "No, it's not just Mindich; it's someone else." I'm not saying Zelensky, but over there, look at him. He's actually acting a little peeved that all the attention is on Mindich more than Zelensky at the moment. So again, that's why I see, and I do not see the U.S. working through Kolomoisky. Right? They have the U.S. has no particular love for Kolomoisky. In fact, there's evidence that they encouraged Zelensky to bite the hand that fed him at some point in the last few years. And they've actually sanctioned Kolomoisky, I believe, to some degree. Wow. So that's why I find the idea of U.S. traces makes sense, but I haven't seen any evidence leading to it. And I've seen evidence to the contrary thus far. But yeah, it's a mess. But I don't see it toppling Zelensky again, unless the U.S., the Trump administration, for lack of a better term, gives the green light.
The other thing, as you pointed out, bankruptcy is one of the other issues that are affecting Ukraine right now. There are going to be $50 billion in the hole. Europe has said we can't afford to pay this, so we need to get our hands on the Russian money. Up to this point, Euroclear has went so far as to say we will sue the European Union if they try to confiscate the Russian money, which is
because they would be held responsible. They don't want to be held. They will sue the Belgian state. We'll see the EU if anyone, because they're getting desperate, because the pressure on them is just, I'm sure, reaching unfathomable proportions from Brussels, from von der Leyen, and the technocrats there. They're demanding that Euroclear open the bank vaults. There's no actual physical money, of course, but in the sense that in legal parlance, but they don't want to be held responsible for the loss of the money, because they know that the Russians will sue. And even, no one believes that any court in Europe would find in Russia's favor in this, but Euroclear has assets all over the world, and lots of them in Asia, of course, because Asian global economy, and there, courts would, actually follow the
Actual
the
law.
rules as written when it
Right.
comes to the international law of sovereign wealth and everything, and they're afraid that Euroclear's assets will be appropriated in response by that as a result of court action in Asia. And they're also, of course, afraid that the rest of the world will just stop investing, stop depositing money in Euroclear, as a clearinghouse, because, well, what can be done to Russia can be done to anyone, and no one wants that. So they're afraid of their whole business model crumbling as a result of this, and they're constantly complaining about countries and wealthy individuals the world over complaining that what are you doing? You can't do this, blah blah blah, because not because they care about Russia, but out of self-interest in the principle, right? That money can be seized in this way for geopolitical reasons. So right now they're holding strong, and they're even giving some fighting spirit pushback, threatening to sue the EU. I don't think von der Leyen takes that threat very seriously, and is probably very peeved that the threat was even voiced. But the pressure is not going to abate. And von der Leyen has just presented another plan to EU state leaders, about how it must be done and how it can be done, and blah blah blah. So, I think that Russia has already written this money off. I mean, really, since the beginning of the conflict, but at most, this money would support the Kiev regime for 2 years, probably not even 2 years, a year and a half. That's what they're looking at.
Why haven't they sued them through one of the Asian organizations? I mean, for all intents and purposes, the money has been stolen. I know they're going with the idea that it's being held.
Frozen. There is a difference between in the legal understanding between frozen assets, which I guess in legal terms is acceptable, and actually removing sovereign assets, which is not. I mean, I'm not saying that is in any ways correct, but that's the rules that they have written and are playing by. So that's the reason why. And Russia has, launched lawsuits of various forms, particularly about the siphoning of the interest off of this. But that's, shall we say, small potatoes in the bigger scheme of things. And again, even if Russia took Europe to court, it is something that would be probably decades, right, in the pursuit. It's not something that would happen immediately. There might be immediate political repercussions, but any final settlement would be so far down the road that I'm sure that's one of the arguments that the von der Leyen people are making. We'll be long gone when
We'll be out of here before then.
Someone else will have to worry about it then if there's ever repercussions from it. I'm sure that is one of the principal arguments that they are making. So
I've been looking at what has been taking place on the battlefield. And of course, Kupiansk, Pokrovsk, they're still being, I guess the noose is getting tighter and tighter in this case. Troops are trying to get out of Mitrograd.
In Mitrograd, the Russians have pushed up through the south, collapsed the south of the pocket. And right now, it's really just the center and the west that the Kiev regime is holding on to, the Kiev regime forces there. And again, they've got to be absolutely critically short of ammunition, food, water, everything else at this point. I don't know how many troops are left alive at this point, but I can't tell you how many videos I've seen of buildings that they've been inhabiting in southern Mitrograd being one by one fabbed out of existence.
Wow.
Just, boom, the entire building gone. Boom, boom, right? I've seen multiple such videos. So, I've also seen social media posts by Kiev regime commanders talking how again, despite all the mythology, the copium about high Russian, yes, but what's the cost? High Russian casualties. There was just another Ukrainian commander reporting, that we're wiped out and we never see the enemy. We're fabbed, we are droned, all right, and we are shelled by artillery, and we never even get to see the enemy, which puts the lie to the whole. Russia is suffering huge casualties. They're only winning because of mass meat wave assaults and the valiant Ukrainian defenders slaying 100 orcs to the man. That sort of mythology that the Western mainstream media has built up and has never yet and probably never will abandon. I mean, that's probably the way their history books will be written.
Wave attacks.
Yeah. It's not that way at all. That's why one of the reasons why it takes so long and makes some people very impatient is because Russia is absolutely minimizing their casualties.
From my understanding, it's like trickle attacks. Like one of the guys went to Ukraine, came back, and was given this kind of breakdown of what it looks like on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And Simplicus also did this kind of breakdown. It's like 2 and 3 people.
Yeah, I did it in my own channel. I did an in focus video on this about a month ago. Infiltration tactics. You want to call it trickle tactics? That's another acceptable term. And it's basically a result of modern warfare with drones and 24/7 satellite and drone reconnaissance and everything. And the high degree of precision long-range strikes on either side. Now, Western military doctrine is all premised on, their Jedi art of combined arms maneuver warfare, where you gather all of your assets in one big punch, armor, mechanized troops, everything defended by air power. And then you blow through the enemy's lines and you cut them off and you break their defenses and everything. And that was the whole idea behind the 2023 NATO planned offensive that Russia crushed. Although it has to be said, of course, that the Kiev regime didn't have the air power component of that. But it doesn't work in modern warfare now. I mean, if you want to call it postmodern warfare, if that helps you picture it. But in the age of drones and long-range precision strikes to the degree that they are, you can't gather big critical forces of equipment and men together because they are immediately identified and hit, right? Hit by HIMARS or tornadoes on one side or the other, hit by FABs, by glide bombs, by long strike drones, by FPV drones, right? You can't do it. They just wiped out, and that's why Russia has, to a very significant degree, simply really reduced the amount of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles and APCs and everything else it's using on the contact line. They're not completely cutting it out, but you see many. I mean, it's been talked about again and again by people who are paying close attention to this. And it's not that Russia doesn't have them. They're stockpiling them for future use against NATO or something. But there was an article in The Independent talking about exactly about this right now by, Western, military thinkers saying that the problem is that NATO is behind and they don't understand modern warfare, and if they don't understand what's happening in Ukraine, and if they try to go to war with Russia, they'll be destroyed right now because they just don't understand this. So the idea is behind the infiltration tactics is that you put 2 or 3 groups, very small groups of people that can have the best chance on foot, right? Or in some cases by motorcycle if you're moving really rapidly, but mobility, right? So that you aren't identified or focused on in particular by FPV drones, but other things. And that you just filter through the Kiev regime's defenses. And then on the other side of those defenses, you start coalescing together, and then you build up the critical mass on the other side of the defenses, where they're not looking for it, and then you just collapse the whole thing, right? That's the idea. And Russia's had very good. This has been what Russia has focused on since really late spring, right? Most of this year has been success with these tactics. And yes, it takes a long time, but again, it minimizes casualties, it minimizes attrition of equipment, and it's shown success. Now, Russia didn't invent this. In fact, in the latter stages of the 2023 Kiev regime summer offensive in the south, after NATO's combined arms maneuver warfare failed, this is what Zaluzhny's tried to switch to. And there's plenty of reports out there about that. And they didn't break Russia's first defensive line, but they came closer and actually engaged it, which they never got to with these stupid combined arms maneuver rushes that were identified, well in advance and just pummeled with artillery and airstrikes and everything else out of existence. Now, the difference is that Russia had a very well-fortified, well-manned defensive line, and they couldn't infiltrate effectively. They couldn't filter through. They were identified, stopped. But now, particularly with the manpower shortages that the Kiev regime has, Russians are able to just infiltrate and filter through those defensive lines because it's been commented how few people per square kilometer there actually are because of their shortage of infantry, of manpower. And all the drones in the world ultimately can't make up for that. Right. And particularly they can't right now or in the past couple of weeks with the Silent Hill or Stephen King's The Mist fog that has been on cross battlefield, which the drones aren't flying, the artillery is less effective, the air power is less effective. And either side could have taken advantage of this situation because it does affect different capabilities on both sides. Both sides use drones to a very high degree. Right. It's Russia that identified this and exploited it very quickly, right? By realizing that they could suddenly start using tanks and vehicles in rapid rushes, not, like a temporary combined arms maneuver warfare suddenly being effective again because the drones weren't flying either for spotting or attack. And a case of that is Novopavlivka in the Zaporozhye region, where Russia just, rapidly advanced tens of kilometers right through a major stronghold with tanks and everything, like almost from a previous war, because they were able to do so because the reconnaissance and the long range strikes with drones or otherwise, couldn't identify them. So it's only temporary, but they have exploited that situation it can be expected this time of year, like the mud, like everything else. It's an environmental factor that can be expected. Right? It's a little more extreme than usual, right? But not outside, the realm of imagination. And Russia quickly identified it. Maybe they were even prepared for it and acted on it. But that's what Russia's tactics are, other than this particular fog situation, is infiltration. And it has worked for them for the last 8 months.
Is it fair to say that the Zaporozhye line is fundamentally collapsed? I mean, Russia's taken
what line?
Well, I guess that's kind of my point. There's what is it? The Malaya Tamachaka. There's
Malaya
Rova Napolia.
Yeah, Malaya means small. Malaya Tamachka. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Rova Napolia. That's another one, and apparently there was
Rovnapil. Yeah.
And Yablovoka. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm butchering this name.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. These are small settlements. That's part of the problem with the conflict right now, is that Russia's forces are moving so fast that you don't even get to learn the names of the settlements before they're already in the tactical rear.
But they did this in 24 hours. Yeah.
Yes. Settlement. Yeah. And just in that direction, 8 settlements. right?
Wow.
Just in the Zaporozhye area over the weekend, 8 settlements. So yes, very rapid advances. I mean, yes, Russia has had huge success, with what they're doing around Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, right, and Kupiansk, and other places, Liman, Seversk, and so forth. But it is in Zaporozhye the last week, both in West Zaporozhye and in East Zaporozhye, right? In the Orehov direction, but also in the Gulai Polya direction. So two different sides of the Zaporozhye front, if you were. But yes, the Kiev regime's defenses are just crumbling there. It's hard to tell whether they are actually retreating by order or whether the troops are just retreating. But there hasn't been any evidence of any retreat being ordered. It looks like the troops just abandoning their position for the most part. And this is a consequence of Russia's, it's again, the butcher's bill of Russia's war of attrition is coming due. The Kiev regime doesn't have the manpower. They don't have the equipment and the munitions either. There's also that side of it, but they don't have the manpower. And in order to try to slow the Russians down in Pokrovsk, and now this desperate attempt to try to break the cauldron open to get their people out, right, in the Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, and the Kupiansk cauldrons, again, they're stripping more and more forces from other fronts. And Russia, with this fluid dynamic situation, right, they see a shortage of forces in Zaporozhye, and they just shift and surge forces in that direction. And that's why they're having the success they are. It's because the Kiev regime further stripped, to try to, plug gaps in other areas, or these absolutely absurd and, self-defeating counterattacks, very late in the day, that they always wait. They never accept the military necessity with withdrawing their troops, to a more defendable position out of political reasons. And then they leave them too late. And then they exhaust even more troops in failed attempts to break them out. They've just done it again and again and again, and they keep doing it. And in this case, they don't have any more reserves to draw on. So they're having to strip entire other front lines that have already been stripped several times before of even more people. And that's why Zaporozhye is now crumbling, right?
Wow.
And I mean, they're that far from what I would identify as collapse. And I never use that word.
Yeah, you don't like the term.
I don't like that term, right? Because people throw it around like it's some magic phenomenon, some line that you cross and then it's all over. I don't like that. And they haven't collapsed. They've had some, you could say, local collapses. Perhaps you could argue that, but there hasn't been no military collapse. And even now, I see crumbling, but it's that close, right? That I would seriously consider, at least in the Zaporozhye direction, to use that word, because I don't see them reforming a defensive line. I mean, Orehov, I guess, in Western Zaporozhye is their best bet, but I don't believe the defenses there are properly manned or built in the first place. They just aren't prepared for it. They aren't prepared for it.
Last question. Putin apparently had talks with Netanyahu over the Gaza peacekeeper issue. This is supposed to be going to the UN Security Council. I have to be honest. What time is it? Okay, yeah, a few minutes. I have to be honest. I am very confused with the relationship between Russia and Israel, especially considering Israel is this kind of proxy of the United States. But it seems that Russia maintains
Russia and Turkey, Russia and everything. Like, Russia doesn't have this, you're either with us or against us foreign policy. They don't.
Well, Turkey, right? I get. I mean, that's kind of the devil that you are just stuck with for the time being.
It's the same thing with Israel, right? Now, there was a situation like before 2022, even maybe a little bit before that, right? Even 7 years ago, say, where Russia was still genuinely interested in genuine good relations with Israel, right? There's a lot of former Soviet citizens in Israel, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of them, right? And particularly not Netanyahu himself, although he himself, of course, is Polish, but with a lot of his coalition, right? Their electoral base is a lot of former Soviet, Jews, right? I mean, I say Jews, of course, the majority of Israeli society is actually secular, right? That's something that is shown statistically, but never really admitted to. But that has, I think, changed over the last few years. And yes, Russia was willing to make deals with Israel and Syria, right? That they wouldn't use Russian air defense there or allow Syria to use Russia's air defense, as long as Israel largely restricted their targets to Iranian and Hezbollah in Syria, and not Syrian government strikes, which you could rightly say is a stab in the back to Iran and Hezbollah, but it wasn't a stab in the back because Russia was perfectly obvious. They were not in Syria to fight for, a reforming of the Middle East and against Israel. They were in Syria to defend the Syrian state. And that was made clear to Iran and Hezbollah. And you can agree with it or disagree with it. That's fine. I'm not so sure I love it to begin with, on larger multipolar geopolitical terms. But that is the terms that Russia went in on. But now it has gotten to the point that Russian-Israeli relations are bad now. I mean, they could be worse, but they're not good. And it's, again, a large part of this, this U.S. forcing everything to you're either with us or against us kind of thing. Now, but
Right.
Russia never doesn't talk to anyone and is never not willing to make pragmatic, realpolitik, realist interest, national interest focused deals with everyone. And I mean, that's what we're seeing right now
In this
not
conversation.
I know there's lots of people who want to believe that the Kremlin is ruled by secret Zionists, and there's some secret Zionist conspiracy between Jewish Putin and Netanyahu to take over the Middle East, or some other absolutely batshit conspiracy theory pablum that has been put out there by some people. None of it is in the slightest has any relation to reality. It's a lot less dramatic than that. It's a lot more morally gray, and it's simply pragmatic, realpolitik, realist, focused interests. In this case, I don't think Russia actually believes that any of this is going to happen. But
they don't believe the peacekeepers.
What they have put forward is that, I just playing the diplomatic elder statesman, right? The adults in the room, and saying that if peacekeepers are put in Gaza, that there should be no U.S. proxy temporary quote unquote government over Palestine, that it should be Palestinians from the beginning. Even that's what they're arguing with their draft, and that is not acceptable to Israel. So the whole thing is not going to go anywhere. But again, Russia is just being the adults in the room at the United Nations with this. They've been largely, while having a role in every, the quartet, every previous vision of solving, or putting off the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, they're now being completely shut out of the process by the U.S. and Israel, because they don't matter anymore as far as they're concerned.
I see.
This is them attempting to remind everyone that they're still in the room and that this is unacceptable to the rest of the world. But ultimately, Russia doesn't really have much leverage in this particular situation. And I don't think they seriously believe that this whole thing is going to work anyway. I mean, there is no ceasefire on the ground
No,
in Gaza,
there's not.
in Lebanon, anywhere with Israel. So, I mean, take it all with a grain of salt. I think there's a degree of going through the diplomatic game in all of this.
I see. Mark, you are fantastic. Great breakdown, as always. Always appreciate you joining me. The audience loves you. I think you're fantastic.
Not everyone. I know you out there.
Well, what do you mean? My audience loves you. I mean, we're up to.
There's always some haters. Right? Yeah, that's
look. I have trolls that come to my channel just to troll me on my own channel. That's just life, right? But no, man, great analysis as always. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can find Mark on Boosty, Boosty, under Real Politic with Mark Sleboda. Definitely check him out. All of his content and interviews are on Boosty, where you can register for it. Mark, you have a fantastic rest of your day, man. Thank you for this. You be safe.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. All right. I always like to say Mark is the best in the biz. Always enjoy him and always enjoy his analysis. I'm going from one damn good guest to another. The man himself, Ted Rall. How you doing, Ted? You doing all right?
I'm good. How are you doing, Jamal?
I am doing fine. I'm sorry about the link. I thought I sent it. Sometimes I overlook sending the thing that is the most necessary in the process.
Well, I overlooked that you didn't send it. I was like,
yeah, that was my bad. I'm sorry. But thank you for the reminder. I try to pay attention to the phone or my text or whatever when people are supposed to come on. But Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist. Ted Rall has multiple shows. He has TMI with the one and only Manila Chan. He also has Deep Program with John Kiriakou. There is another show that he has on Thursdays with another cartoonist. What is the name of that show, Ted?
It's called the DMZ America Podcast, like Demilitarized Zone, with Scott Stantis.
America Podcast. Okay. I'm going to put that in my list. Ted, I brought you on because I have been fascinated by what has been taking place. Donald Trump has gone to war against MAGA. Again, he has been attacking Marjorie Taylor Greene relentlessly. He has been attacking Massey. He has been attacking Tucker Carlson. And, you get Nick Fuentes, who I'm not really a fan of, but I do give him credit for his capability of there are some people who I may not like anything that they say, but I can acknowledge that they're good at doing it.
Sure.
Alex Jones is one of them. I've seen Alex Jones go 30 minutes on Syria, and I was shocked. Like I was like, wow, he's good. He's a lunatic, but he's good.
Right.
Fuentes is one of those people where it's like, God, man, he's racist, sexist, incel, all that stuff. And yet, when he does a rant, he's actually pretty good at it. He's making a point here that MAGA is effectively dead. And I can't agree with him more. Listen to this.
This is now the dichotomy. You have MAGA on the one side. And what does this even stand for anymore? You got MAGA on one side. What does that even mean? Make America great for who? Make it great for Israel, Indian immigrants, Chinese students, illegal immigrant farm workers. Make America great again for them. Make Israel great. Make America great for the global empire, defense contractors, big pharma, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, Palantir. You got MAGA on the one side. And like I said, Brandy Fine, Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz. And then on the other side, you got America first. No ambiguity, no ifs, ands, or buts. What does that mean? America first, Americans first, America only. America first is our credo. Americanism, not globalism, is the credo. Tucker, Fuentes, Candace, Marjorie, Thomas Massey, Dan Bilzerian, Myron, Jake Shields, Lucas Gage, all the greats, all the usual suspects. That's the question. Aiden Ross, Sneeko. Yay. This is a dichotomy. What are you for? Are you with America first or are you with MAGA? I think after this month, after this year, 2025 is the year that MAGA died.
2025 is the year MAGA died. And mind you, all of the people he named have been people that Donald Trump has effectively been attacking. And It's the reason he's been attacking him that is the most mind-blowing part. Marjorie Taylor Greene comes out and says, we need to, go after people who are working with this pedophile, and these names need to be listed. And Trump is like, how dare you? It's like, whoa, you're throwing your body to protect a pedophile, or you're throwing your body to protect Israel. And you get the people who voted for Trump, who advocated for Trump, who effectively was like, hey, we took this America First thing seriously. And Trump doesn't seem to think that way. And up to this point, he's been going after those people. I've been fascinated by this dynamic and the degree that he's been like throwing these withering arguments at these MAGA, for lack of a better word. Give me a take on this. Did you see this coming? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I did see it coming, and I remember thinking that long after I saw it coming, that the $20 billion to Argentina may have been the last straw for the nationalist base of the MAGA movement. It was kind of inevitable. What Donald Trump is playing the role of Chrissy Hind here. Chrissy Hind, at a certain point, argued, the Pretenders isn't a band. I'm the Pretenders. Who the Pretenders is whoever I bring on. Donald Trump's been arguing that about MAGA. He's like, I created MAGA. MAGA is my invention. I trademarked the hat. I trademarked the name. So MAGA is whatever I say it is. And I'm just going to go off on a loop here. But let's say, he says, well, from now on, we give half of our tax money to Israel. That's MAGA, because I say whatever I say is MAGA is MAGA. I think the jury is out as to how powerful that argument is. It wouldn't be powerful to me, but I'm not, part of that orientation. I think it'll work with some people, but certainly not with everybody. And I think this is the beginning of a major fracture in the current Republican coalition. I think what Donald Trump is either willfully or unintentionally ahistorical. He doesn't understand that really, MAGA is not new. I mean, in fact, I have, political buttons from 1916 that show Woodrow Wilson running under the campaign, Make America Great Again. I have political buttons from, 1980 from Ronald Reagan that say, Make America Great Again. This is not a new orientation at all. And, nationalism is not a new ideology in the United States, and nor is far-right nationalism, which you can trace to the Tea Party, which Donald Trump remembers very well, and that he comes out of that, right, directly from 2010. And then you can go back to things like the John Birch Society of the 1960s and back, and the movement that coalesced around General Douglas MacArthur after World War II. I mean, it just goes back and back. So this is what Donald Trump did was surf a wave, and he's basically pretending like he invented the ocean. That's fine. And, he's a master manipulator, which we're seeing right now we have nothing to hide. Let's all vote to release the Epstein file, just like the pivot. It's actually brilliant because he was handed a pair of twos. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to play this pair of twos for everything that it's worth. Because he was about to lose, this 218 vote that Thomas Massie had going on. I mean, defeat was absolutely guaranteed. So he's like, okay, I'm going to make the most of this. He accepts reality as opposed to, say, a Kamala Harris who sees defeat coming 2 months ahead of time and doesn't pivot, doesn't change course, doesn't do anything, and then goes and loses. So good for him. But it is. I'm going to take a little bit of issue with Nick Fuentes when he says that America First is unambiguous. I mean, no, it's not unambiguous. Like, what does that mean? One can argue that, giving money to Argentina is America First. I wouldn't argue this, but because it's to our benefit to have, strong allies and trading partners, and Argentina is one of those, and blah, blah, blah. I don't believe any of that. But the point is, it's not unambiguous, right? I mean, what to you and me, and maybe Nick Fuentes is obviously America First, is certainly something that people like Trump can spin. And, I think that the ace in the hole for Donald Trump is kind of like analogous to what those of us on the left have seen now for years, which is, okay, there's only two parties. So if you're a disgruntled conservative who is a nationalist and doesn't appreciate the fact that, Trump isn't, prioritizing things, the fact that, say, Americans one out of 8 Americans don't have enough to eat, so they're on food stamps. It's like, if he doesn't do that, where are you going to go? Well, they're culturally and politically and ideologically not, open to voting for the Democratic Party. And so they're stuck. So I wrote my column over the weekend for, this week. And basically my argument was that in an age of polarization, a political party like the Republican Party doesn't run against the other party. You're not going to lose. There are no swing voters. There's no people who are like, well, sometimes I'm a Democrat, sometimes I'm a Republican. Those people don't exist anymore. So you don't run against the other party. You run against apathy. Like, that's what your opponent. That's your enemy. As when you're running one of two major political parties in a highly polarized environment. And so, I wrote my column about the Democrats, but the same thing applies to the Republicans. Donald Trump and the Republicans' enemy isn't the Democrats. Their threat is people sitting at home, the way that the Bernie voters did in 2016. And so, like, that's what I think. I'm not sure they're focused on that yet. Maybe because we're still in a pre-midterm electoral environment, but they're going to have to start thinking about that, and soon.
But their ideology, both parties are ideologically against thinking about that in real terms. I mean, like, for example, he's making the argument up with America First. Like, I got to be honest, I think it's less ambiguous, to be honest. Like, if H-1B1 visas, for example, okay, most of those are entry-level jobs. Should we give those to Americans, or should we side with corporations, screw over Americans in order to bring in indentured servants? Okay, well, that's not ambiguous, right? You could spin it, but at a certain point, your spinning is just being dishonest.
As we see and speaking of which, right, the revelation that the Trump organization has hired over 600 H-2A visa, holders.
Of course.
I mean, it's like so insanely hypocritical. It's very instructive to me that, neither Trump nor, anyone sitting around the table there, like Don Jr., says, we can't do this. It's going to look bad when the news breaks. Like, nobody says that because they don't really think it matters.
I don't think they care. I've gotten to the point where I don't think they care. I think both political parties have realized a truth. And the truth is, we're in a two-party system. We don't have this belief that third parties are going to break into it. And so, worst come to worst, you're either going to pick a Republican or you're going to pick a Democrat, or, as you point out, apathy. But in the context of apathy, you don't get what you want in either party. And so,
that's the thing, though, is like, so, like, Democrats are trying to spin their surrender and the shutdown confrontation as like, well, we raised the issue. We'll get credit for raising the issue. It's like, no, because what's going to happen is that voters will continue. This will be another reminder to voters that it doesn't matter much to their life whether a Democrat or a Republican is in charge. And a Democrat might talk about healthcare, but you're not going to get those healthcare subsidies either way, right? So that's and that feeds into the apathy. So I think that is dangerous for each of the parties individually, and the winner is the one who motivates their base, right? I mean, that was Trump's genius, is that he motivated. I mean, think about it. Mitt Romney couldn't do it. John McCain couldn't do it, but but last time a Republican could do it was George W. Bush. That's a long time ago. That's 21 years. Trump can do it, but I think that there will be, and Trump's big contribution electorally was to bring in a lot of brand new Republicans who had never registered to vote before, didn't vote. These were non-voters. He brought some of the 50% of people who are eligible to vote but didn't vote, and he made them vote, and he made them vote enthusiastically. That's what's at stake here. is that part of the coalition, the new voters, the people who will vote happily for a Trump that they think is going to do stuff that they like mostly, or they just won't vote. And that's the enemy for the Republicans. And I don't know, maybe Donald Trump pushing 80 years old doesn't really much care about anything but making money anymore. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's a race to the bottom for both political parties. I agree with you. Who could turn out their base the most? Nick is complaining, but he's probably still going to vote for random Republican that shows up next time.
Yeah, he's not going to vote libertarian, no. or whatever.
Yeah. So it's like they're still going to get the vote. It's like it's just complaining, like spitting in the wind. Well, and yet there's no out the door. Like it's almost like there's a locked door, which is very aggravating because there doesn't seem to be a position to maneuver. Both political parties have just kind of accepted, even if they don't vote for me this time, they will get sick of the other party and come back. And so you get sloshing back and forth without any change ever being made in the political system because both political parties just accept we don't have to do squats.
They're flailing. We're flailing.
Yes.
That's the problem with the two-party system is all you can do is really flail between, which one party that you hate less right now and the party that you will hate less in the future. I mean, a two-party system sucks.
Yes. This seems like it will be damaging for Trump, though. All of the emails that have just came out for Epstein, what the public have seen. I was watching the polling on CNN, 37%. He was underwater 37% on the Epstein issue. He was like 18% underwater under, let's say, like economy, or for that matter, tariffs. He was like 7% underwater for foreign policy, meaning Trump was underwater on all of the things that got him elected. Bills have gone up. The amount that people are paying for energy have gone up. And recently, Trump came out and said, for one, we're paying those tariffs. There's that, right? And him pulling back on the tariffs gets across. Oh, right, costs for Americans have gone up. I need to do something about the fact that costs for Americans have gone up. So, let me back off on some of the tariffs. Then he came back and said this, which we are already paying more money for energy as a result of Trump going after Russia. Listen to this. Listen to this. 500% tariffs that Congress apparently is supposed to be dredging up that Trump is talking about unleashing on America.
Well, I hear they're doing that, and that's okay with me. They're passing legislation, or the Republicans are putting in legislation that very tough. It's sanctioning, et cetera, on any country doing business with Russia. They may add Iran to that, as you know. I suggested it. So any country that does business with Russia will be very severely sanctioned. We may add Iran to the formula, yeah.
That's so incompetent. Like, that's deeply incompetent. A, you're going to drive up prices for Americans, especially for the issue of energy. B, the last time that Donald Trump, every time he throws something like that out, he eventually has to back away from it. If you remember, there was a 500% tariffs. There was the Tomahawk missiles. Now he's back to the tariff thing, meaning Trump has no way to figure out how to end the war. He doesn't want to accept the surrender under Russian terms. And so now he's pivoted back to whatever this is. He is failing under his own model as a president. Or do you think I'm wrong on this?
No, I think it's just I think part of this bug is a feature with Donald Trump. He loves to be, to threaten, and then he feels like, if I yell and scream, I will be able to get my, get these people to come to the table, and I'll be in a better negotiating position. That's as you and I both know, not always true. I was recently in a similar battle with my landlord, who was basically bullying me thuggishly, and it just pissed me, and it just pissed me off more and made me more intransigent. Right? It's and I think certainly That's not going to work with a Vladimir Putin, or with the Iranians who've been dealing with American assholes since the 1970s, arguably long before that.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like you're just the latest in a string of assholes we've had to deal with. Generally, I agree with you that, look, the metric here has to be for Donald Trump that basically Republican voters and plus the new coalition, and basically, to make this simple, a lot of white guys have to feel really like the country is moving back in some kind of direction that they like, where you're not going to have to think about what someone's pronoun is. You might be able to get it. There might be a new factory opening up somewhere near you. You're not going to feel like you're competing with foreigners for jobs, or your kids are not going to be competing, and you're not going to feel like when you go to McDonald's, it's going to cost like $23 for one person. That's the problem for Donald Trump, is that none of those things is true, and there's no future in which it's true because of the nature of the system, as well as these policies that this man has instituted. The tragedy here is that Donald Trump has it all. I mean, he has the Supreme Court, the Congress, the White House, a lot of the state houses. He has incredible power, and he's choosing, ironically, not to use it. And he's not even, legislating. So his achievements some Democrat can come along in 2029 and just, President Newsom or whoever, and just go, and all those executive orders just go away, and they will. And so there's no, because Trump is so ahistorical, he's interested in legacy, right? We see that he's interested in legacy with, I want to build a triumphal arch, stuff like that. He wants to leave behind, he's bigifying the ballroom at the White House. He cares about, what people are going to think of him, or he wants to be remembered after he croaks. But the problem is, presidents are not really remembered for some stupid building. They're remembered for, a set of policies that changed America, like say the New Deal. And Donald Trump so far hasn't managed to do that. I mean, right now, is this a different country in terms of foreign policy? Not really. I mean, we are doing, gunboat diplomacy out of the 19th century with Venezuela, pushing and drone killing fishermen like George W. Bush. Now we do it on the water instead of in the desert. Ooh. It's all pretty much the same. And as usual, Washington is focused on bullshit and not the problems of the American people. So, he hasn't changed the equation because neither he nor the people he has surrounded himself with have any kind of sense of how that would look. I could think of, for example, a grand bargain on healthcare is something that Trump could pull off. It's needed. Democrats are open to it. He could rally his troops. He could have a only Nixon can go to China moment with healthcare. Mm-hmm. He could do that. I was the Republican president who created national healthcare, and every time someone goes to the doctor, God bless Donald Trump. He could do that, but whether
believe in those things,
the strings pulling him, or just lack of imagination, I don't know what, because I'm not there, but something is stopping him.
I don't think he believes in those things. I don't even think he cares. For example, one of the things that he did was, there was a law that was in place that says if you're stuck on an airplane for a certain amount of time, you get a kickback. He got rid of that. Yeah. And it's that's so petty. Some of the stuff just seems
airlines, obviously.
I know, but it's so petty.
Parties, as we just saw with the shutdown, the airlines are why the Democrats caved in on the shutdown. That guy from that CEO of Airlines for America, the lobbying group, the guy that we see all the time on CNN, that dude called up, he called up Schumer and, the 8 traitors like Tim Kaine, and basically just said, hey, we're worried. Thanksgiving is coming. We have 3,000 cancellations a day. We're losing money. Fix it. They pass a clean CR. That's their thing. The airlines run the country.
It's
absurd.
If you are, that's so aggravating. Yes. Well,
Airlines
yeah,
are not, I mean, honestly, airlines are like the post office. It's an essential service. I mean, most
agreed.
real countries have a national airline. I
Yeah,
mean,
agreed. Honestly, if it was up to me, energy grid, transportation,
all is,
airline. Yeah,
yeah, essential services should be nationalized. I mean,
agreed.
that's just like a basic thing. Like, if you have to have it, healthcare, education, these things, there's no, you just have to have them. Doesn't matter if they're too expensive. Doesn't matter if they don't turn a profit. You need it.
Are we looking at Trump effectively destroying the Republican Party for the next term? I mean, it seems like the midterms, they're going to get crushed. I mean,
Unless the Democrats snatch victory from the jaws of defeat the way that they did with the shutdown. Don't put that past them.
no, I won't. I
No,
won't.
I mean,
I
that was
won't.
amazing, really. Definitely he's harming the Republican Party. And look, this is I suspect you, like me, have read a lot of books about like the decline and fall of, empires and stuff. And
Yes.
and like the thing is, this is that trend. So right now it is a race to the bottom. We're both parties and the country and the system are circling the drain, and the question is which of these two parties is going to circle faster. Certainly, Donald Trump is harming the Democratic Party. Can the Democrats take advantage of it? They're also very fucked up. And we could have had this conversation
Agreed.
just as easily about the schism within the Democratic Party.
No, agreed. I mean, you can see it with Mandani, the
Totally.
way he effectively ran against the
And
Democrats.
by the way, Al, he's preparing to look very, very disappointing. I'm already getting nervous.
Already, he's not even.
Yeah.
He's not even in
Yeah,
office.
he's talking to corporate. For my
What do you
taste.
mean? What did he do already?
Well, he said he would, but he's going to keep he's keeping the police commissioner. He's doing all sorts of, he's basically making all sorts of news, like meeting with corporate heads and stuff like that. I'm like, I get it, but it worries me because he's sounding like everybody else. It's like AOC went to vote for Mama Bear. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like they're all the same. You can't be a truly independent ass kicker within an organization. Ask Marjorie Taylor Greene. She'll tell you.
Well, you know where your other mayor is currently. I don't know if you've seen this. He's
Oh God, I saw.
Here to my mail team.
That's a damn shame. And he's even wearing, what is it, yarmulke?
Last I
He's even wearing that thing on his head.
It's embarrassing.
And
Like, why are you in Israel, dude? You're the mayor of New York. Like, you don't do anything about foreign policy. Why are you in Israel?
Fuck if I know. I mean, I kind of know. If I were him, I'd be out job hunting because that's like job one.
Right.
City college, government class would probably be about the right place for him. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I would take that job myself. It's just sort of. I don't know. I mean, he hits all the wrong notes. I mean, the guy's like literally he couldn't even. He's the incumbent mayor, and he couldn't run in his own primary because he knew he was going to have the floor wiped with him. It's like, what the fuck are you doing in Israel? And these are your last 6 weeks in office as mayor. Why don't you go to Israel next spring? You got nothing to do. You're on December 31st at midnight. You're no longer the mayor of the city of New York. There's some storms coming. Be around. We have lots of flooding.
Yeah.
It's weird.
I mean, you would think, and I'll let you go after this, but you would think that after Mamdani's win, where they ask him, hey, where are you going? He's like, I'm staying in New York.
Yeah.
I'm a mayor of New York. And he wins in spades, that they would be like, hey, maybe I don't need to take this trip.
I don't know what's up with Eric Adams. I mean, he was once, like when he was in 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement, he was a pretty good dude. And,
Was he?
Kind of, and then he like decided to politicize his career and Once he left the NYPD, it was all downhill. I think he made a bunch of too many deals with the devil, and that's it.
Yeah. Ted, man, always appreciate you. Thank you for this. Ted is going to be on Deprogrammed. That's going to take place at what time is it? It's 9 o'clock.
Minutes.
Yeah, 14 minutes. Also on TMI with Manila Chan. That's going to take place at 10 o'clock. So back to back. Ted, you're fantastic, man. Thank you for
Thanks
this.
from all you are too. See you soon.
Have a good one. Bye-bye. All right. The one, the only Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist. Ted is a damn good friend of this show, and I thank him for it. Mayor Adams looks like an asshole going to Israel. You are the mayor of New York. You're the mayor of New York. You have nothing to do with foreign policy. And yet he's sitting in Israel looking crazy with that stupid looking hat on his head, effectively saying, hey, man, I did good things for Israel while I was mayor. Absurd. Just absurd. Outrageous. Just outrageous. I can't believe that. And especially after Mamdani, when that question is asked to him, and there he's like, I'm staying in New York. I live here. Why am I going there? And he wins in spades. Meaning you don't have to do that. If you notice, all of those people on that stage believed from flesh to bone, almost like lungs believe in air, that they needed to answer that question in a very particular way. He was the only one on the stage that didn't answer that question in that particular way and got credit for it. And so you think, what are the hooks that are in the various people that make them feel like they need to do that and to behave in that way? Because the reality of it is, in an electoral sense, it's unnecessary. Maybe they thought they'd get more money. Maybe they thought they'd get more business opportunities. Who knows? But something in them fully believe that we must answer that question by blowing whatever Israeli that we need to do that with in order to get something out of it. Dude, if you attend to your voters, you don't need to do that. And look, man, whether you're Thomas Massey, whether you're Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think what you are seeing are various people who are coming to the conclusion, we don't need to do this. America first means something else. It means America first. Look, I may not agree with, let's say, all of the premises that these guys come up with in their definition of that. But I have no issue saying, hey, man, I live here. We should put money in healthcare because, if it's America first, we should care about the Americans who require healthcare. We should care that people, whether they eat or not, we should care about whether or not when they get old, they get Social Security or they have some capability of taking care of themselves. To me, these are obvious America first positions, even though I know on the right, that's not the way they look at this stuff. They look at this stuff as we need to get rid of immigrants. We need to, I don't know, add in whatever the hell you want to add in. Jeremy Kuzmarov, he's going to be here talking about Kolomoisky. I'm bringing him on to talk about it because Jeremy knows that chapter and verse. He used to come on the show before and discuss it. And I used to be like, my eyes used to bleed over because I didn't have any reference point in regards to who Kolomoisky was and everything else. Well, that has fundamentally changed. And considering what is happening, he will be a really good person to kind of break that down. Something else that is taking place is this. Listen to what Trump is saying here. This is, everything he's saying is a lie, by the way. And this feels like a wag the dog. Wag the dog is a political strategy where you start a war to distract from something domestically. So let's say if you are Bill Clinton, the Monica Lewinsky issue is just blowing up and you go bombing in the Middle East. Or in this case, you are Donald Trump. You're 37 points underwater for the Epstein issue. Everybody and their mama, including many of the cultists that are on the Republican side, are in full belief that you are defending a pedophile and that your name is most likely on the list, which is the reason why you're throwing your body to defend that pedophile. And so we have Trump now seemingly
going to Congress. Venezuela, are you discussing options with Congress? Are you going to Congress to discuss potential options?
We like to keep Congress involved. I mean, we're stopping drug dealers and drugs from coming into our country. And I actually told Marco and some of the people, our Secretary of State is doing a great job, by the way. I said, go to Congress and let them know we're not letting drugs come through Mexico. We're not letting them come through Venezuela, and let Congress know about it. We don't have to get their approval, but I think letting them know is good. The only thing I don't want them to do is leak information that's very important and confidential and may put our military at risk, or whoever is doing, CIA, military, etc. But I said, go and see Congress, see the representatives that we're supposed to be seeing, and be open about it. If they say, we don't want you to stop drugs from coming into the country, I don't think that would be good. Yes.
What a dumb perspective. And a lie. Again, complete, utter lie. The idea, intelligence had pointed out that drugs were not coming through Venezuela. Donald Trump has just been murdering people in the Caribbean, fishermen. If indeed you full well believed that drugs were coming from Venezuela in speedboats, and you're watching those speedboats, you can watch that speedboat refill 8 times, because that's effectively what it would take, in order to get to the United States, and stop that speedboat at any particular point in that process. Meaning, if you have the capability of blowing up a speedboat and you are the U.S. military, you can stop that speedboat. The Coast Guard stop boats all the time. Why don't they stop it? Instead, they go on a killing spree. I'm saying this is outrageous. They're trying to use this argument that there is a gang that is in Venezuela and that this gang is importing drugs into the United States. What is it? Cartel de los Soles, or Sun Cartel. This doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And to make it even more pertinent, Donald Trump or the Trump administration has come out saying Venezuela is planning to blow up buildings or energy infrastructure and blame the U.S. Sure they are. Sure they are. The same Donald Trump has admitted that the CIA is in Venezuela. So you have admitted that you have sent your goons, your evildoers, in the way that George Bush would say, into a foreign country that has done nothing to you in order to destabilize that particular country, in addition to putting pressure externally in a military sense of murdering random people and random fishermen with threats of strikes on that same Venezuela. Donald Trump apparently had mentioned also, yeah, maybe I'm open to talking to Maduro. Well, the New York Times pointed out that Donald Trump did talk to Maduro, that Maduro effectively offered Donald Trump pretty much any and everything, including oil. But Marco Rubio convinced Donald Trump, hey, it would be better to just take Venezuela. That would be better. And if you take Venezuela, you'd have access and control of those resources. So you wouldn't have to worry about Russia and China and Iran and the influence that they're having in this particular region. You wouldn't have to worry about Maduro. You wouldn't have to worry about any of that stuff. But if you think a little bit further into that, what if you're wrong? Think of what happened with Yemen. The United States effectively ran a war on Yemen, a bombing campaign. Ansar Allah at no point voted. Ansar Allah was firing missile systems that, if they didn't hit those ships, they nearly knocked those planes out of the sky. And in one case, the ship had to move, I guess, a diversion maneuver in order to avoid being hit. In which case, the Trump administration said, hey, man, it would look very bad if they knock one of our planes out the sky. It would look very bad if they hit one of our main ships. So let's just call this a day. I'm saying Trump is making assumptions that he is going to be able to take over Venezuela. In the very beginning, I suspect he probably wants to try to get it on the cheap. So they give that lunatic Machado a platform where she can just call for military intervention into her own country, which is just outrageous. For all of my issues that I have with the United States government, at no point would I ever say I want the country to be militarily attacked or militarily occupied. That is effing outrageous. The traitor, treasonous is an understatement. And yet, that lunatic gets the Nobel Peace Prize, which completely bastardizes any notion of it being a Nobel Peace Prize or having any meaning at all, short of this kind of regime change narrative that is being implemented at this case. Up to this point, Maduro has been arming the citizenry in lieu of some potential attack by the United States. If indeed he was that unpopular and you're giving weapons to all of these other random people in the country, the people would use those weapons to overthrow that same leader who's doing that. I'm trying to point out that regardless of the issues that people may have, like, Trump is unpopular. Most Democrats are unpopular. Any country, the political leader will have detractors in that country. If you give those opposition leaders a blank check, you are making it more likely for those opposition leaders to be that much more boisterous in regards to their behavior and their attitudes, and less inclined to engage in actual politics where they actually try to get votes and so forth. And I suspect that she's behaving this way because she can't get votes and she can't win on her own steam. I'm saying Donald Trump is creating a fiction in order to go after Venezuela. And I don't know if this is penis envy or what. For all intents and purposes, if you look at what has been taking place around the globe, he tries to go after Iran. That fails. That fails miserably. Iran has come out, I think Argachi has gone so far as to say, why would we negotiate with the United States? Why? They couldn't get what they wanted by war. We damn sure are not going to give it to them in negotiations. You can't get what you want in Russia. You fail miserably. And for any kind of deal, Russia is giving you a surrender document that they want you to sign. Losers don't get to take terms. And so the Trump administration has nowhere to go with that. With China, just get folded. Just got outright folded and humiliated in regards to this negotiations with Xi Jinping, where Taco Trump had to effectively back down, back away, and still didn't necessarily get what he wanted in regards to the rare earths. And so in regards to this block, you failed completely. Hell, you failed against Yemen for that matter. And so you decide, I need to show some level of military prowess, and I'm going to try to show that against Venezuela. Those aircraft carriers are vulnerable at this point. They were very powerful weapons in the 1980s, maybe even in the 1990s, maybe in the 2000s. These days, hypersonic missile will take those things out the water in a heartbeat. My point is that the Trump administration is making the argument we don't have to go to Congress to start a war with Venezuela. We can murder random people in boats to our heart's content, and it's perfectly fine. And from my understanding, the military or people in the military have been actually getting legal advice because they're concerned about the illegality of the orders that the Trump administration is effectively giving. So that is the latest on the Venezuela front. I see my man in the background. Well, I see his chair in the background. He will be back shortly. Oh, there he is. There he is. My man, Jeremy Kuzmarov. How you doing, man?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I haven't seen you in a while. Long time no see. I'm glad you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks.
And just to give the audience a heads up, Jeremy Kuzmarov, he's managing editor for Covert Action magazine, author of several books on U.S. foreign policy. You also wrote a book with Dan Kovalik on Syria, correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's called Syria: Anatomy of Regime Change, and it looks at the 40-year regime change operation targeting the Assad family. And it looks really places the current regime change operation and U.S. foreign policy in Syria in larger historical context, and pointing to a pattern of continuity since World War II, the end of World War II.
Oh, you go back all the way to World War II. I
The end
knew
of World
about
War II, yeah.
George Bush Sr. That the idea was, well, we want to get at Iran, so we need to go after Syria in order to get after Iran. That type of logic. I didn't realize that it went back that far.
Yeah, in
Wow.
fact, it was one of the first CIA coups, the post-war era, 1949, preceding the Iranian coup. We go into that history and how the CIA overthrew a nationalistic regime led by Shukri al-Kuwatli, and a lot of it was about an oil pipeline. They were trying to get an oil pipeline through Syria, and he was resisting that, and so they overthrew him and imposed a military dictator, and that set the groundwork for Hafez al-Assad, who kind of coup-proofed the Syria regime. I mean, there was a certain harshness to the Syrian regime, but it came, people forget the context. I mean, and that the CIA was plotting coups, many different coups, and had installed these venal leaders in the past. And the Assad were just demonized without any understanding of the context in which they emerged and how they were, nationalistic leaders, and that's why they were targeted
Yeah.
for regime change.
Yeah. I had Dan on the show. He was talking about it. I think I even did a show on it when the book came out. So no, man, good job on that. I brought you on because you and I have had conversations in the past about corruption in Ukraine. And you had mentioned at the time, I didn't have context for the various people who you were effectively talking about. Well, New Day have context now because all of this stuff has effectively hit the news. And it has been a big story in the West. And so there's this kind of interesting question that I was talking to Mark. I was like, okay, who runs Naboo? And Mark's thing was he doesn't necessarily believe it's the US or it's Europe. He thinks it has more to do with, let's say, an internal regime that is somehow grabbed the levers of control and that has used it as a weapon to go after Zelensky. So Kolomoisky was one of the guys, billionaire, came out and pointed out, he said, a bit annoyed that they're going after Midrich and some of the other people. And he seems to be strongly implying that, look, the person you need to go after is Zelensky. Even saying that Midrich was, he was my step and fetch it. He was the guy who would go fetch me things. Like, he's obviously not the person who's behind all of this. And he makes a point in saying Zelensky will, quote, soon be gone. I mean, he's sitting in court saying this stuff. And just for the audience to see, this is Kolomoisky right here, billionaire, used to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kolomoisky was the one that ran the show Servant of the People, correct? Or am I wrong on this?
I think you're right. He was a big financier. He helped finance Zelensky's rise to power as a big financier. But yeah, he's under indictment. Is he in prison or where is he now?
He's in jail.
Oh.
He's in jail. And he has been putting out all of this information in jail, calling Zelensky Napoleon and all this other stuff. I don't even know how.
Him, so.
Well, I don't even know how he got caught. I mean, Midrich went to Israel to get away. And from my understanding, Kolomoisky at one point went to Israel also to get away. So I don't necessarily know how he ends up in Ukrainian jail. Right here. This is him sitting in a jail cell. Well, he's not in a jail cell, but in court. A billionaire in court. But he has been talking right much trash. So help us out. Who is Kolomoisky?
Well, yeah, first, Ukraine is known as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. It ranks on the bottom. So, why was, I think more people should have been asking, why was the United States pouring in billions and billions of dollars and billions of weaponry and all these governments, whether Canada or European countries, when we have serious problems here at home, billions of dollars. We know a lot of that, those weapons were, resold on the black market
Hmm.
and stolen, and a lot of aid money was stolen. I think it's a disgrace that there was not a larger pushback. I think this is one of the worst public policies we've seen. There are other horrible things going on in the world, but this is right up there as just an absolute disgrace. Both Democratic and Republican administrations. And it saddened me that the activist movements have not pushed back. There's been anemic pushback. There have been large protests over the Gaza, which are for good reason. But I don't know why those movements aren't fixated on this as well for years. And a lot of the alternative media just either ignored this or presented this Russophobic narrative. So
Yeah.
and now these scandals are coming more and more to the surface, how corrupt and venal this government is in Ukraine. And then, yeah, there are these intrigues within the Ukrainian government and leadership elite. But Kolomoisky had funded Zelensky, and that's a thing. So he helped put him in power, and Kolomoisky, yeah, he's now in jail. He's not a savory person. I think he was financing a lot of these militias on the front line of the war,
He was.
including
Yeah.
the Azov battalion. And I think he is Jewish, but why is he financing neo-Nazi groups? That is, I don't know.
Why did Zelensky turn on him, by the way?
Well, that I don't know. I'm not an expert in all the internal intrigues, but I just know it's an incredibly corrupt government. And Zelensky was kind of a front man. He's a comedian. He had no experience in politics, and they just tell him, he's like a Barack Obama, a kind of empty vessel, and they just tell him what to do, and he projects a certain image. Had this image of that he was a reformer because of that TV show where he played this teacher who called out corruption, and it was supposed to be real life. But we see he's presided over a horrific government that has sold his own population out. The Russians are gaining territory, and so many Ukrainian youth have died. For what cause? It's been catastrophic for Ukraine. They've lost a lot of their territory. On the eastern Ukraine is a very rich industrial area, and they've lost it now to the Russians. Zelensky sold out a lot of Ukraine's economy to foreign interests, and Wall Street banks and hedge funds bought off a lot of their land. He's passed a lot of regressive labor laws, but he sent the youth to their death in a war that was easily avoidable. You had the Minsk peace agreement. Firstly, that was a coup provoked by outsiders. The EU
Yes.
and U.S. CIA provoked the coup. So it's really an illegitimate government that was brought in 2014. But they had the Minsk peace agreements that could have resolved the conflict with Eastern Ukraine, because the Eastern Ukrainian provinces didn't accept the new government. Then they were pushing these language laws and basically trying to eradicate their culture. It's more Russian based region, Russian culture there. They're trying to eradicate that, even taking drives against the church. And then they had a peace agreement that was agreed upon by everybody, the
Minsk.
Minsk agreement that would
Right.
have granted some autonomy to the eastern Ukrainian provinces. But Angela Merkel said, "Oh, we just signed that to buy time to provide more and more weapons to Ukraine so they can build their military to attack Russia." And look what's happened. And all the youth of Ukraine have been killed. A lot have fled into exile. The New York Times, which is heavily biased newspaper, but I read it every day, and they're having reports that there are towns in Ukraine where there are no men left
Yeah.
because they've either fled, either they were killed or they fled the country. They don't want to die fighting a senseless war, so they flee, and there's no men, so they can't, manage their economy. There's not enough working age people and men for the hard manual labor jobs. They're trying to get some women, but their economy is teetering on collapse in parts of the country. Another article that the Times reported on that they were kidnapping youth, were afraid to go out of their house
Hmm.
because they were being conscripted. They didn't want to go fight, and they were being kidnapped at rock concerts by army recruiters. Were actually
Yep.
kidnapping young men. And other articles pointed to they have a kill ratio, that they're having competitions who could kill more Eastern Ukrainians and Russians, and it was a sick culture in their military, like the U.S. had in Vietnam, that led to a huge anti-war movement. When Robert McNamara imposed a kill ratio, it led to these macabre competitions in American military units to kill more Vietnamese, and they would often kill civilians so they can pad their death counts and get rewards. And that's going on in the Ukraine military, um, and it's being reported on a pro-Ukraine newspaper. So, uh, I mean, this is just a horrible. Again, I don't understand the public in the United States, why they've not pressed this issue and had protests or whatever to stop U.S. aid. I mean, there have been attempts to. They were successful in Canada to block Canadian military, support to the Israelis for good reason, but why aren't there movements to block aid to Ukraine?
It's different.
It's
It's just different.
destroying Ukraine. I mean, it's not, it's
It's
just anyway.
different. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. Like, it's, I want to say it's more complicated, but it's not really when you actually look at it. But I don't know if most Americans have just looked at it. Like for the Israeli thing, you could see them murdering children and women. You could see the death count. You could see every day, like these videos of these people getting massacred. It's very clear, right? Who's the aggressor in that situation? You have the military with nukes effectively destroying and killing a civilian population. And this one, it's like you have to know about the Minsk agreements. You have to know about the Istanbul agreements. You have to know about Angela Merkel saying that stuff. Most Americans don't know that stuff. And so they don't make the connection in the same way. It's not as binding. I get your point. You're right. It's a catastrophe. When you have like 1 million people dead, it's like the average age of the soldier is like 50. Okay, something's wrong, right? No, I agree with you. I want to move to Syria for a bit. Who does Jelani work for?
Oh yeah, and that's another disgrace. And that's why we need a broader anti-imperialist
Disgrace.
movement, and a movement that pushes for a change in U.S. foreign policy, because this is just, I mean, horrific in so many different countries. I
Yes.
mean, this guy was a top Al Qaeda. For years we've been told we have to spend billions and trillions of dollars fighting terror, the evil of terrorism, and yet we see that a top Al Qaeda operative, you have Donald Trump smiling and buddy buddy with the top guy in Al Qaeda last week, who's being fed at the White House. I mean, he was on the terrorist list for years, and I think they just took him off now, the terrorist
Yep.
list. And I mean, he fought U.S. troops in Iraq. He served as a top lieutenant and I think Trump's first administration, he presented one of his great accomplishments, the murder of this guy al-Baghdadi, an ISIS leader, and yet al-Shara was his top lieutenant, and now he's being celebrated in the White House. And he carried out ethnic cleansing since he's come into power. I mean, the New York Times has had reports about this,
Hmm.
massacres by the Syrian government targeting Shia Alawites who had been supporters of the Assad government. And I mean, the Times, for years demonized Bashar al-Assad, and they're still running articles. Like yesterday, I think they had a huge article on a woman supposed abuses in Assad's prisons. But yet they have also had some articles on horrific atrocity that al-Shara has committed since he's
Yeah.
come in. So, it's yeah, it's a horror show. I mean, those massacres are considerable what he's presiding over, and I mean I think we're only getting a small sample of what's really going on in Syria, because these are Taliban type people uh, who will impose very very strict Sharia law, and are very brutal fundamentalists, and it
Why?
completely undercuts the rationale of the war on terror.
Agreed. I mean, Petraeus saying, like, hey, man, looks like, I worry about you. And it's like, what the hell? Or him shaking hands with Donald Trump saying, hey, he has a tough history, a tough guy, and all this other stuff. Who does he work for, though? Is he under the Turkish thumb? Is he under the American thumb? Does he have multiple masters in this situation where he's trying to balance all of these forces? Because, why was he at the White House? I guess that's probably the main question that I'm asking, and it's related to who he works for, who is Jelani's or al-Shara's master in this case.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of questions. Many believe he may have been turned when he was in Iraqi prison and recruited by the CIA or Mossad. I mean, he's serving foreign interests. I mean, Assad, yeah, there was a certain harshness to the Assad dynasty, but they represented Syrian interests. They were trying to stand up to the Israelis, who occupied the Golan Heights and took over that land, and adopted an economy that was designed to bolster Syria's prospects, and standing up to the United States, not
Yeah.
allowing U.S. military bases and other regional power that have their own designs. And so, al-Shara is just allowing Syria to be carved up by all these powers who have their own, each have their own designs on the country and its oil. I mean, Turkey, yeah, Turkey is a big winner of the Syrian war, and has expanded its presence massively. Qatar, all these countries were part of that coalition against Assad. And don't forget the Operation Timber Sycamore was run out of the CIA operation was run out of Turkey and Jordan. So, and the Israelis, I think they also they see Syria as key to their energy independence in the future, and they want to revitalize these pipeline projects. So that's very important for Israel, and they're gobbling up more and more land. With al-Shara, he's, I think, moving to improve or even normalize relations with the Israelis, and he's basically acquiescing to Israeli occupation, Golan Heights, and expanding their occupation in Syria. And that's, of course, also a stepping stone to Iran. They use Syria as a base to potentially to destabilize and attack Iran. And Assad had been close to as a Shiite Alawite, had been allied with the Iranian government and supported Hezbollah. So the December 2024 coup or revolution was key victory for the Israelis, Israeli interests, Turkey, Qatar, other Gulf states who hate Iran, and the United States. And the U.S. covets the oil of Syria, and also is on board with these pipeline projects which Assad had resisted. And Israel's a kind of proxy of the United States in the Middle East. So those are all the winners, and the losers are Syria. They've lost the sovereignty. They basically lost control of their country, and they're led by these extremists and Islamic extremists. And historically, the U.S. prefers Islamic extremists over nationalistic or socialist governments that will establish control over their natural resources and stand up for their own populations.
From what you know of Syria, since you wrote the book on it, will HTS accept him signing a peace deal with Israel? I mean, you have multiple groups that are part of HTS. I would imagine many of those groups didn't lump into this under the idea that the guy who was in charge was going to make some kind of agreement with Israel in order to settle hostilities. And again, I'm saying hostilities because it's not like they've ever attacked Israel. But I hope you get my point. Are they going to accept him making, like if he's part of the Abraham Accords, for example, will that be accepted by some of the groups that are part of his coalition?
That's a good question. I mean, there may be some opposition. He's on thorny ground, but it seems that they right now that there is enough acquiescence that he can get away with that. I mean, that's the
Interesting.
direction he's clearly moving in. And I mean, yeah, he may have a renewed civil war in Syria. It depends. I don't know if Assad will ever be a player again, but the forces that have supported him and other nationalist elements you may have an uprising given the violence and given the policy that this government is adopting, which are contrary to the interests of the Syrian population and are deeply unpopular, and given
Yeah.
the waves of violence we've seen there.
Had you ever visited Syria? Did you ever get the opportunity to go?
I've never visited. Dan Kovalik has spent a long time in Syria and is a lawyer of the Shia Alawite population. So the book was divided. I wrote the historical chapters and the chapter that focused on U.S. Foreign policy and intellectuals and their role in supporting it. And he wrote several chapters that offer the voice of the Syrian people and based on his
Experiences
time
there.
spent in Syria.
And you said this goes all the way back to the Second World War. So what was the motivation for it in the Second World War? Just to prevent a nationalist government from taking power?
Correct. Yeah. After World War II, the first Syria had been a colony of France, and their first leader was named Shukri al-Kuwatli, and he was a nationalist who had fought against the Ottoman Empire and the French, and fought against in the Israeli War for Independence with Syria. And then the U.S. was trying to establish an oil pipeline that would go through the Middle East to the port of Haifa. And he
Mhm.
rejected that because he felt it would benefit foreign powers, not the Syrian economy. And that's when he became the target of regime change. And they sent in Archie Roosevelt, Kermit Roosevelt's brother, and Theodore Roosevelt's grandson, and a guy Miles Copeland Jr. were key figures in coordinating a coup against Kuwatli. And they brought in this military officer named Zain, and he basically gave the green light for the pipeline. And he also made peace overture to Israel, and basically acquiescing to Israel. Yeah, he didn't last that long. He was very unpopular. He was also very autocratic and very pompous and I think corrupt. Like he amassed a lot of wealth for himself in a short period. And
Mhm.
so the Syrian didn't tolerate him very long, and he was overthrown after 8 or 9 months. And there was a lot of instability in Syria in that period. And then Miles Copeland stayed in the country, and it was trying to. They supported the CIA backed several other coups, including in 1957. They tried to bring in this guy named Shishakli, who was more of
Mhm.
a fascist. The CIA are often aligning with most reactionary groups, and that's what we see today. They're aligning with these right wing Islamic extremists who are selling out their country. And,
Mhm.
Shara talked about bringing a Trump Tower into Damascus. And opening up to American investors and allowing American oil companies to come in, but that's not going to help Syria rebuild from the war or develop their economy. And it's going to be more of a neo-colonial economic arrangement. and that's not in the interest of the Syrian population. And yeah, the CIA helped fuel a lot of instability, and that's, when Assad came in, he kind of ruled with somewhat of an iron fist. But I mean, Syrians were happy in the sense that he brought some stability and he prevented outside powers from infiltrating the government and overthrowing it. As one
Right.
analyst put it, he kind of coup-proofed the regime. And Syria's economy did develop significantly under Assad. The quality of life, he brought a lot of social programs. He ruled in more of a socialist fashion, and the country really did progress in the years of Hafez al-Assad from 1970 to 2000. And he was standing up to Israeli interests and other foreign powers. So that's why a lot of Syrians supported Bashar al-Assad when the uprising developed in 2011, which was led by Islamic fundamentalists. And the CIA documents show that from, 'cause the CIA was plotting against and U.S. against Hafez al-Assad, and they were talking about, CIA documents from the 80s are like, how do we exploit, the Muslim opposition? And the CIA was supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. In the early 80s, it was an uprising, and they even invaded Syrian military barracks and killed a lot of soldiers. And then Assad brutally suppressed that uprising in 1982, but the CIA was supporting it then. And it's the same. They're trying to exploit, divisions and align, from that early period with the Islamic, because the main opposition to Assad as a secular nationalist was Islamic, the Muslim Brotherhood, and its remnants are the ones that led the uprising in 2011. They were depicted as these, students and humanitarian
Free Syrian
pro-democracy.
rebels. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
No
there was.
pro-democracy terrorists. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've
Yeah.
discussed that before. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there was, some legitimate disaffection, but it was from the outset there were these Muslim extremists and violent jihadists, and that's who the U.S. and CIA were supporting. And then they armed them under the Timber Sycamore, was one of the largest CIA covert operations since the 1980s. And they were
Jeremy,
implicated in horrific atrocities. What unfolded after 2024 with the al-Shara government now was, proceeded. I mean, even his forces were implicated in suicide bombings and torture and body mutilations and horrendous atrocities during the Civil War. Although the media, presented most of the atrocities, made the public believe that Assad was a monster and he was committing horrific crimes, but we found the majority of Syrians actually supported Assad. Over time, though, the population was weakened based on the sanctions, that the effects of war over time led to a weakening ability to resist the foreign onslaught on the country.
Jeremy, great breakdown, man. Thank you for this. I just always remember when you used to come on the show, you used to give this kind of breakdown of the corruption that was taking place in Ukraine. And, somebody made the point of saying, like, Nabu and Sapo are getting involved now. And it's like, why now? It's like it's been radically corrupt the entire time. And it's just so happened, like, oh my God, there's gambling here. As if they're just now noticing corruption, and even making the point, I think it was John Helmer who made the point of saying, like, the scale of corruption that was in Ukraine goes in the billions. This is like $100 million, which is small change in the context of the larger corruption that was taking place with the weapons and everything else. No, I remember you breaking this stuff down, and this stuff is finally hitting the pages, where everybody is now actually discussing it and talking about it. So I thank you for this, man. Jeremy Kuzmarov. Jeremy Kuzmarov, he is managing editor for Covert Action magazine, author of several books on U.S. foreign policy, including Syria, Anatomy of a Regime Change. Is that what it's called?
Correct, yes. And it's with Baraka Books.
Jeremy, thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay?
Thanks for having me. Great discussion.
Absolutely. You have a good one, man. Be safe.
You too.
All right. Shout out to Jeremy. I haven't had the opportunity to talk to Jeremy in a while, so it's good to actually catch up with him. Just so you know, they got rid of the job numbers, I believe, for October. But have no fear. Have no fear. Listen to this. Listen to this. Listen to what they're saying about the job numbers for October. I'll put it to you this way. If indeed Trump was actually what he said he was, and that the economy was doing what he said it's doing, and prices were what he said they were, meaning prices are up. The amount you're paying for food, energy, healthcare, all of those things have gone through the roof. Whatever you got as a tax cut, that's assuming you even got a tax cut. Let's say it might have been $4,000 on average. You're paying like $10,000 or $11,000 in increased prices as a result of Trump's policies. Trump doesn't care about that. Trump doesn't care about that. Listen to the job numbers.
But yeah, it is true that the household survey wasn't conducted in October. So we're going to get half the employment report. We'll get the jobs part, but we won't get the unemployment rate. And that'll just be for 1 month. But yeah, it is true that we probably will maybe be able to concoct something that we'll never actually know for sure what the unemployment rate was in October.
Did you hear that? How do you say that with a straight face? We'll concoct something. We'll come up with something. We'll concoct something. But nobody's going to know what the unemployment numbers were for October. So, he's very affable when he says it. He's very affable. That's outrageous. Trump was elected in large part for the economy, for foreign policy, for what else? Ending the war in Ukraine, preventing additional wars that the United States would get involved in. He was elected on immigration, meaning when you compared him and his opposition, Donald Trump was winning in spades on all of those issues. Now, they may say, who cares more? And you might get Kamala Harris like by 2 points or something like that. But for all intents and purposes, Trump was winning on all those numbers. And all of those numbers have fundamentally flipped. He has failed miserably. And I'm not saying fail by my standard. Trump has failed miserably on his own standards. And yes, if Kamala Harris was elected, we'd probably be having the same conversation, which kind of gets this idea of Ted Rall pointing out circling the drain. Circling the drain. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It sucks. Sources, dude, look it up. Look it up. This is not the definition of winning. This is the opposite of that. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. Whatever you got as a tax cut, and that's assuming you even get a tax cut, you are paying twice as much in regards to tariffs, energy, food costs, all of those things. Why do you think that when people were complaining about prices, even on Fox News, people were complaining about prices going up, that Trump was like, okay, I'll back off on some of the tariffs? Or when Trump was making the argument that, well, people don't need 32 doll babies. They can deal with 2. Well, dude, if you're not increasing cost, why can't I have my 32 doll babies? Right? I mean, some of this stuff is just rational. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It is unfortunate. Final straw was when Trump signed the CR to open a government that included new hemp restrictions. The Republicans sneaked it in. That was the final straw. That was the final straw. I think there were several final straws. Not ending the war is one, right? Trump could have walked. Nothing stopped Trump from walking. He could have walked. And now I'm going to escalate sanctions. Our oil prices and the amount that we pay for energy is going up because gas, oil, all of those things are effectively on the world's market. If you are trying to constrain Russian energy, then you're going to increase the costs of that Russian energy, which means that our energy costs also goes up. I think ours went up by like 3 or 4%, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember reading it correctly. Jimmy, I don't think I'm saying now because I know too much. No, 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 that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. That's a positive thing. That's a positive thing. Look, man, I will tell you, I have been out when the war first started in Ukraine. It didn't fully sink in. Like in the very beginning, it didn't. When I was at the radio station and we start covering it, there's this level of excitement that comes along with covering a war. I know that sucks to say, but it's true. Something new is happening. Something dynamic is happening. As horrible and as much of a catastrophe as it is, you're outraged by the fact that that thing is happening. That generates energy because at that point you're angry, you're upset. At least for me, I experienced it through anger and shock. And then at some point it sinks in like, wait a minute, this is a real war. Like this is a war. This is like World War II stuff. Maybe not necessarily on the grand scale, at least not yet. But you have industrial murder of two sides, that both sides are just trying to kill each other by two militaries. And you get the US and the West saying, we're going to dump all of this money in for ideological reasons that are fundamentally dishonest. And you're at the station and you're covering that. And keep in mind, when you're covering news at the station, you're covering world news. So it's not like you're locked in your sandbox with a specific US perspective. It's not that. You're looking at this, sitting on the moon, looking at events, and you're trying to be as honest as you could possibly be in regards to your explanation of what is taking place. And you're like, if certain things are true, then it leads to a conclusion. You could say, well, Hitler kept the trains running. But that's less important than the fact that he was committing a genocide, right? It's that. You look at it and you're like, okay, well, dude, Putin's standing out there like a minister begging people to come to Jesus. And at no point does anybody want to come to Jesus at all. You have Minsk agreements, 1 and 2. You have the Istanbul agreements. You have warnings going all the way back to 2008 during the Bucharest summit. Meaning over and over and over again, you get William Burns putting out the memo, net means net, where he is effectively warning, this is what is going to take place. There will be a civil war that Russia will have to get involved in if we keep pushing NATO membership for Ukraine and Georgia. And then the West turns around and says, this was completely unprovoked. And you're sitting at the radio station like, okay, all of these people are lying. They're lying en masse. They're taking a American perspective as opposed to just an honest take. And you're pushing back on that like hard. You're not wrong for living in reality. They're wrong for being perfectly okay with 1 million people being killed in a war that never should have taken place. A complete and utter catastrophe where the youth of a nation, a country effectively dying. And I say a country dying because if you have 50 million people and that number drops to half, then your country is fundamentally dying. You've lost 20, if not 25% of your territory. That is a country dying. And if Russia gets their hands on Odessa and cut off Black Sea access, it is a country that is dead. That's not a positive thing. It's not something that Russia wanted to take place. It was purely this notion of geopolitical gamesmanship where they were cynically willing to get all of these people killed. And for what? When this first started, I remember asking the question, there will be a day where the guns will stop firing. All of these people will be dead. And the Ukrainians are going to look around and say, what was this for? And that is a damning question. That is a question that you don't want to have to answer. That is a question that you would run from for as long as you can. That is a question where you may even make stuff up for. I've had conversations with people who fought in Iraq, And, this idea of trying to come to terms with the fact that you were lied into a war and that people around you were being killed because you were lied into a war is very difficult to swallow and very difficult to accept. In the Ukrainian case, it's on some level even worse because it's not even something that was being done on your own steam. It was something that was being imposed externally with external actors not caring about the fact that all of those people are dying, all of those people are being killed. And instead, they would rah-rah with the flag. They would have their little stupid Ukrainian flag pins on. And they would say, you guys need to go out and continue to die. It's outrageous. You're not wrong for having, for being brought into reality. As bad as it looks, it is a real thing. The same thing is true for Gaza, right? At no point would I have thought that we would be okay backing and funding a genocide. New day. New day. Again, you're not wrong for coming to a certain awareness. It's just, it's grim, it's dark. But it's the reality you're stuck with. And looking out from the void when the void is theirs, somewhat of a pointless endeavor. So, all right. I am going to end this. What time is it? Yeah, about 15 minutes early. Shout out to my guests. Shout out to Mark. Shout out to Ted. Shout out to Jeremy Kuzmarov. I haven't talked to Jeremy in a long time, so it was nice catching up with him. I want to thank all of you for joining me. Dr. Susan Jacobs, she says she's a chocoholic. Never been a chocoholic. Like a baconholic, if anything. I've turned into a rice whore since being in since being in these countries. But look, I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you for joining me. What is it? Dark chocolate is my jam. Really? Yeah, I can never get into chocolate. I mean, I have my moments. I think if anything, I'm more salt, less chocolate, if that makes sense, which doesn't necessarily do me all that well. Jay Galt. Jay Galt. John Galt. What is that? Atlas Shrug, right? Free Africa. Free Africa indeed. I think Africa's going to free itself, to be honest. All right. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you for joining me. You can support this content. PayPal, Patreon. Yes, I used to be a libertarian. It's embarrassing. It's not embarrassing, Jay Galt. It's not embarrassing. I used to be a Democrat. I think that's even worse. I used to be a Democrat. Look, man, you grow, you evolve. It's just life. It's more honest to have an arc, right? As opposed to being wed to a particular position and you find out that position is wrong, but you can't necessarily deviate from the position because you don't necessarily want to. No. Everybody's an arc. It's just life. It's just life. Look, I will tell you, most people don't follow the stuff. Like, I don't think most people are aware of this stuff. Like, you would throw a rock, hit a person, go have a conversation with them. You'd be shocked at what they don't know. In this case, it feels normal because we talk about it all the time. But from the standpoint of the population itself, oftentimes the population don't know. At some point, we were all there, right? You weren't paying attention at 6 years old. You weren't paying attention at 10. You weren't paying attention at, there's always an arc. It's not a negative. That's just life. You just grow. It's just called growth. All right. You all be safe. You be kind to the degree that you can be kind. Like the video, Share that Michael Hudson converted you. Really? Really? I think it was a few people that converted me. Richard Wolff, Jack Fresco from the Venus Project, James Baldwin. Yeah, there were a few people. Like, it was just kind of an arc where you're hitting certain notes and it's just like, this seems right. And it's this inner sense that this seems right. Or at the very least, if you're being honest, this seems right if you're being honest in regards to value set. All right. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day. You can support this content. PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, memberships, buy me a coffee, super stickers. I think that's all of it. But if nothing else, like the video if you indeed enjoyed the show. You all have a fantastic rest of your day. Have a good one, guys. Have a good one, chat, Jamal, and classy chocolate lovers. Classy chocolate lovers indeed. Get yourself some wine, some chocolate, and enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one, all. I'll see you bright and early in the morning. Chocolate.